Okay, we are picking up Mem Tes Amud Aleph. We are we are 3 lines from before it starts getting wide on Mem Tes Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says. So again, we were talking about if you would that a bracha is supposed to have you can have many subject matters in the beginning of the bracha, but you're supposed to end with just one subject matter. So the Gemara asked, "My Havila, what is the end of the discussion? What is the final halacha that we say when it comes to the bracha for Bnei Yerushalayim?" So Rav Sheshes says, "Pasach barachim al Yisrael amecha." If you started by saying al Yisrael, so then because you want to keep with that one theme ending. So Chosim b'Moshe Yisrael, so Yudem was saying that he saves Yisrael. So again, that's keeping with the one theme. Pasach Barachim al Yerushalayim, if you started with Yerushalayim, so Chosim b'Bon Yerushalayim, so then you finish with you again, you would finish with building Yerushalayim, because again, you want to keep with that one theme. Whatever it is you start with, that's the one that you're going to end up, that's what you're going to end up going with. So Rav Nachman Amar, Afilu Pasach Barachim al Yisrael, even if you started saying Rachim al Yisrael Amecha, which is actually the way that we do benching right now. But even if you start with saying Yisrael Amecha, Chosim b'Boni Yerushalayim, you still conclude with Boni Yerushalayim, which is a different subject matter. And what's the reason why? Mishum Shenamar, because it says in the pasuk, Bona Yerushalayim Hashem Nitcha Yisrael Yikanes, that Hashem's going to build Yerushalayim up and He's going to gather Klal Yisrael in, which means Emaseh Bona Yerushalayim Hashem. When is Hashem going to build Yerushalayim? Bisman Shenitcha Yisrael Yikanes, at the time that He gathers together the Bnei Yisrael. So you see that so even though you start by saying that. You start by saying Yisrael Amecha, but you could finish with Bnei Yerushalayim, because even though it's two separate subject matters, one's Yerushalayim and one's Yisrael, but you end up, they're kind of tied together. Amalei Rav Zeri Rav Chizda. Nisni Mar V'Nissi. Come on, let's go learn something. Let's go learn a piece of Gemara. So Amalei Rav Chizda said to him, Berachos mizona lo gamrina v'sunuye masnisa. You want me to bench? I haven't learned how to. You want me? I don't know how to recite benching properly, and you want to learn Gemara. So Amalei said, "What are you talking about? My high. What's the story that you're talking about? That you're saying that you don't know even how to bench properly, and therefore you don't know how you can learn Gemara." So he said to him, Amalei, "The ikla bei Reish Galusa. I was at the house of the Reish Galusa of Arche Brucha Mezona, and I benched." V'dafke Rav Sheshes Sukoai alai kechavia, and Rav Sheshes was like. He was hovering over me like a snake that's about to pounce on someone. So, meaning that he did not do a good job with benching. So what? It's an image. It's an image. Yeah. So he said, "Vamai." So what was he? Why was he hovering over you? Like, what did you do that was so terrible? So he said to him, "Delo amri lo bris, lo Torah, lo malchus." Because when I was benching, I didn't mention either the bris or Torah or malchus, which we talked about that you're supposed to be saying that. So he said, so Reb Zera asked him, "Amilo Amrit." So then why? Okay, so he was right to hover you over like a snake. Why didn't you repeat it when you're supposed to be saying it? So he says, "Kid Rav Chanan ol Amar Rav," because I hold like Rav Chanan ol Amar Rav. The Amar Rav Chanan ol Amar Rav, lo Amar bris v'sora u'malchus yatzid. If you do not mention bris or Torah or malchus based of it in benching, then you're still yotzi benching. Why? Because bris l'fi she'enim v'nashim. Because bris. The women are not obligated. It's not possible to have a bris milah by women. And Torah malchus and if you don't say Torah and avodim, it's also not a problem because you don't have that concept by women and by servants. That why they're not applicable. Women don't have a chiyuv of Talmud Torah. And also, women don't have this concept of malchus because they're not mechuyev to say Kriya Shema every day, which is when we talk about malchus. So therefore, they don't talk about. You don't mention that. So again, in those days, it seems that they did not have one common text for what benching was. So everyone would kind of have these broad understandings of what they were supposed to be doing. So Rav Chanan held that, said in the name of Rav, he felt that because everyone should be benching along the similar lines, and since women and slaves are not able to have Torah and bris and malchus, so therefore he left them out when he was benching. So Gemara answered, so Reb Zera said to him, "Va'ad shavke kol hani tanoi v'amarai." So you left behind. We just went through a whole Amud now, talking about how you're supposed to be including all these things. So you left them all behind. V'avad karav, and you did it like Rav. So Rav Sheshes was right in that he didn't include you, and that he was hovering over you like a snake. And even according to Rav, like who says that you don't have to do it, that's only b'diavad. But lechatchila, of course, you're supposed to be saying it. So therefore, he was right to hover over you that you didn't know it. And next time, I'm sure when he benched, he did include those things. Okay, the Gemara is going to go now discuss the bracha, the last bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv. Again, what you were required to say in it. Amar Rabbi Bar Barchana, Amar Rav Yochanan, Hatov HaMeitiv Tzricha Malchus. As we said earlier, that when you say the bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv, you say bracha to Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam. You're supposed to say with Melech Olam. So Gemara asks, "My kamash malon kol bracha shein ba malchus lo shmei bracha." We already learned this. Rabbi Yochanan already taught us this. That if you don't have malchus, if you don't mention kingdom in there, then it's not going to be considered to be a. Then it's not going to be considered to be a proper bracha. So why do you have to tell us now that Vatova Meitiv has to say Elokeinu Melech Olam? So Gemara answers, Rab Zera, Lomar shetzricha shtei malchios. It's to tell you that you need to have two mentions of malchios in that bracha. Why? Chada dida, one is for the own bracha of Hatova Meitiv. The chada de Bonu Yushalayim, and the other one is for Bonu Yushalayim, because again, we don't say malchus, we don't say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam when we say the bracha of Rachimna. So you're going to probably jump and say right away, wait a second. If that's the case that you're saying two malchios because you don't have, because Rachim didn't have a bracha, didn't say a bracha. If that's so, Nimni you should have three brachos. Chada dida, one for Atova Meitiv, the Chada de Bonu Yushalayim, the Chada de Berachos Haaretz. No Delacha also doesn't start with Baruch Atah Hashem. So why don't you have to say three brachos? So Gemara says Ella, and again we're going to come back to this whole concept of bracha smucha l'chaverta. So Gemara says Ella bracha berachos haaretz my time. What's the reason that we say by no dilcha you don't have to say Elokeinu Melech Olam, you don't have to make a bracha. Mishum dehavile bracha smucha l'chaverta, because it's going back on the first bracha of Hazanas Olam. Because in that bracha you have it. So, and because again those brachas are all doraisa, so you have the first bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam Hazanas Olam. That's the first bracha. When you say no dilcha, you don't need to say an opening bracha because it's continuing on from the first bracha that you had. So Bnei Yushalayim. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Bnei Yushalayim nami lo tubai. So Bnei Yushalayim also shouldn't need to have a bracha. Why? To have a bracha smuchal chaverta, because it's also following back on the first bracha of Hazanas Olam. So why did the Gemara say that Hatov HaMeitiv has to have two brachos, one for itself and one for Bnei Yushalayim? And then it said, well, you should have three brachos. Then it says you don't need three because the second bracha is going back on the first one. Then the third one's also going back on the first one, and it should not need the fourth one, which is very complicated. But it's its way of saying that just like you wouldn't be saying for the second, you shouldn't need saying for the third. And the Gemara is asking, if so, why don't you just say one Hamelach in the fourth bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv? The Gemara answers, Hu adin dafilu b'nei Yushalayim nami lo bai. You're right. Really, you don't need to say a second malchus in the bracha of Bonu Yushalayim of Hatov HaMeitiv for Bonu Yushalayim. So why are we saying a second? Why are we mentioning a second malchus in that bracha? Since we said in Rachim we mentioned for David HaMelech. So if we talk about that malchus, lav orach ara delo amar malchus shemayim. So it would be improper not to mention then for Hashem's malchus, which is coming after that. So therefore, because we mentioned one, we had to say the other one. Rapapa amar hachi kamar tzricha shtei malchios levar medida. You need to have two brachos. You have to have two mentions of melech besides for the one for Hatov HaMeitiv. So you have three mentions of malchus in Hatov HaMeitiv. You have one which we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Olam. Then you say Avinu Malkeinu. You say Malkeinu Adirenu, and then you say at the end of the bracha you say Rashi says, I believe, and you say Melech Hatov HaMeitiv. Melech Hatov HaMeitiv. You say Melech, you're going to have that, and then you're going to Avinu Malkeinu Adirenu Borenu Golenu Kadoshenu Kadosh Yaakov. The end you say Hamelech again. So that's really three mentions of Hamelech that we're talking about. So it's talking about one is for Hatov HaMeitiv, one is for Uvnei Yushalayim, and the other one is for No Delachav. So we're really mentioning three times. We're saying in that last bracha of Hatov HaMeitiv, we're saying Malchus. Okay. Gemara is going to go into now what happens if you are sitting at the table. It's Rosh Chodesh, it's Yom Tif, and you forgot to say Yalav Yavo, or you forgot to say Ritzei. The Gemara is going to discuss now. Do you have to go back and bench again, or are you able to have some sort of catch-all? You're able to say a special tefillah, which will save you from having to go back to the beginning. The Gemara says Yasser Rav Zera Achari de Rav Gidel, Yasser Rav Gidel Kamei de Rav Huna, who's sitting before Rav Huna, Yasser V'Kamar. Tavalo Hiskar Shel Shabbos. If you were sitting and benching and you realized in benching you said, I forgot to say Ritzei. So what are you supposed to do? So Omer, you say the following bracha. Baruch shenasan Shabbasos l'menucha la'am Yisrael b'yava la'os l'bris, that blesses Hashem who gave Shabbos for menucha to his nation, to Yisrael, and he gave it with love. and for a sign and for a bris with them. Baruch Mekadesh HaShabbos, that Hashem is blessed who gave us Shabbos. So that is the bracha, and that's actually the halach. You're supposed to say that bracha, and the Gemara is going to discuss it now. If you are benching, you forgot to say Ritzei, you say V'nei Yerushalayim, and you finish that bracha, and then you say, shoot, I forgot to say Ritzei. If you say right there, before you start the next bracha, Vatov HaMeitiv, you insert this bracha, then you're able to, then you don't have to go back to the beginning of benching and say it over again. So Amar Lei, so Rav said to him, Man Amra, who said that? So he said Rav was the one that said it. So how did Yasef become? And then he was also sitting and he said, Tavlo Hiskir Shal Yamtiv. Let's say you're sitting and you're having the Yamtiv meal. And you realize that you forgot to say Yalav Yavo. So Omer, what should you say? You say the following bracha. Baruch Shanas and Yamim Tovim Lama Yisrael. Blessed Hashem who gave these days to Klal Yisrael. L'simcha l'zikaron for happiness and for remembrance. Baruch Mekadesh Yisrael v'azman. Blessed Hashem who was Mekadesh Yisrael and the Zmanim. So Amar Lei Man Amra, who said this bracha? Amar Lei. So Rav, he said to him, Rav was the one that said it also. How did Yasef become? And then he said the same. He asked another question. Tavlo Hiskashor Rosh Chodesh. It was on Rosh Chodesh, and he realized that he forgot to say Yalav Yavam benching. What are you supposed to do? Omer Baruch Shanas on Rosh Chadashim Lama Yisrael. That blesses Hashem who gave Rosh Chodesh to Klal Yisrael as Zikaron for remembrance. Lo Yadan, and I don't know Amar Basimcha, Ilo Amar Basimcha. Because if you remember by the bracha that we said for Yom Tif, he added in the word Simcha. But he says, I don't know when he was saying it if he mentioned the word Simcha or not when you say it for Rosh Chodesh. Ichasim ba, Ilo Chasim ba, and I don't know if he finished it with saying with the Baruch Atah like we did for Yom Tif, and also Ididei Idirab. And I don't know if he was saying it in his own name or if he was saying it in his Rebbe's name. I'm not sure of all those three things. But halacha l'maisa, the halacha is that if someone is benching, and again he forgets, and he did not yet start saying the fourth bracha, you can insert this the bracha that the Gemara brings down now, which some of the benches actually have this bracha in there, and you could say that, and you don't have to go back to the beginning. If you forgot to say it, except for Rosh Chodesh, I think the Gemara will discuss. If for Rosh Chodesh you don't have to, but if for Shabbos and Yom Tif, you would have to go back to the beginning of benching. Gita bar Amud Yomi havikai kamed Rav Nachman. He was before Rav Nachman when you were supposed to be saying either with Shabbos or Yom Tif. The Gemara doesn't specify which one it was yet. So Rav Nachman made a mistake and he forgot to say either Ritzei or Yalav Yavo. Turning now to Amabez on Tesma Beis. And he went back to the beginning of benching. So Amar Lei, so Gidol bar Rabbi Yumi said to him, "My time of Marhachi. Why are you going back to the beginning of benching? You go say this other bracha that we were just talking about." So Amar Lei, the Amar Rav Shila Amar Rav Ta'chazul Rosh. He said I went back because he said that if someone makes a mistake, then you have to go back to the beginning of benching. So he said to him, "Amar Rav Hona Amar Rav Ta Amar Baruch Shanasam." But we just had this Gemara that says that if you forget to say Yalav Yavo Ritzei, that there's different brachos that you're able to make. So Amar Lei said to him, "La Vitmar La." But I said when it was according to that, Amar Rav Menashe Bar Tachlif Amar Rav Lo Shanu El Shelo Pasach Batov Ameitiv. That's only talking about that you can say this bracha if you didn't start making this, if you did not yet go into the fourth bracha Batov Ameitiv. Ava Pasach Batov Ameitiv. But if you started saying the fourth bracha Chozul Rosh, then you have to go back to the beginning of benching. So that is what Allah was. He says, I realized after I started saying Batov Ameitiv, and that's why I went back to the beginning of benching. Amar Rav Idi bar Avin, Amar Rav Amram, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. So let's say someone was davening and he did not mention Rosh Chodesh in Shmona Esrei. Machzirno, so we make him go back to the beginning and he has to say it over again. The Berachos Hamazon, but if let's say someone forgot, it was on Rosh Chodesh and he forgot to say Yalav Yavo, so what is the halach? Does he have to go back and repeat benching over again? So he said, Machzirno, so you don't go back and say it. Amar Le Rav Idi bar Avin Rav Amram, Maishna Tefillah, Maishna Berachos Hamazon. What's the difference between Rosh Chodesh? For Rosh Chodesh, for davening, that we say that you have to go back and you have to say Shemona Esrei over again, but for benching you don't have to. So Amar Le, he said to him, Afli Titi Kashli, that's a good question. I had the same question myself about what the difference is. Usha'alti Rav Nachman, I asked Rav Nachman, but Amar Le, and he told me, Minei Demar Shmuel lo Shmieli, I didn't hear this reason from Shmuel, but let's go take a look and see if we could figure out what the reason is that there's a difference between Shemona Esrei and benching. So he says, Tefillah, the chovahi. For Shemona Esrei, for davening, that's a chiyuv. A person has a chiyuv as an obligation that he has to daven Shemona Esrei on Rosh Chodesh. So mechzir naso. So therefore, if you forgot to say the words for Rosh Chodesh in Shmon Esrei, you got to go back and you have to say Shmon Esrei again because you had an obligation to daven that tefillah. Berachos mezona, but when it comes to eating a meal, the ibai achel, ibai lo achel. If a person wants, he could eat. If a person wants, he doesn't have to. There's no chiyuv to eat a seuda on Rosh Chodesh. So therefore, on Rosh Chodesh, if a person forgot to say yalav yavo, he does emachzino, so we don't make him go back. So Gemara asks, Elama'ata, Shabbos of Yom Tovim, Delo Sagi, Delo Achel, on Shabbos and Yom Tiv, where you do have an obligation to eat. You don't have it's not a voluntary meal. There's an obligation to have Suda Shabbos and Suda Yom Tiv. So what are you going to say? Hachinami di Itay Hadar? Is it also the halacha that if someone forgets it, that he has to go back and he has to start Shmon Esrei over again? Amar Lei in, yeah, it is. That is the halacha. The Amar Rav Shila Amar Rav. That if a person made a mistake and he didn't say it, then he has to go back to the beginning of Shemon Esrei. So Gemara asks, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav Ta Omer Baruch Shana. That if someone made a mistake in again, we just had this thing in benching that you could say this bracha that Baruch Shanasan, the wording which you don't have to go back to the beginning of benching. So he says, Lavit Mar, I already told you. Lo Shanu Lo Shelo Pasach Batova Meitiv. That's only talking about if he did not yet start the bracha Tova Meitiv. But if someone did already start the fourth bracha, then he does have to go back to the beginning of benching, and that would be the halacha. Okay, we will stop here, and Amir Tzashem, Rabbi Silber is back, I believe, starting Monday.